Myrtle, no! You got that chaotic sauce, didn't you? What's up, guys? I'm the Pencil here, and here we are to do a breakdown and review of chapter 143 of Four Nights of the... which is known as Tragedy. And if this ain't a tragedy indeed, golly, this chapter, it's got a whole lot of stuff into it. A whole bunch of character work, a whole bunch of world building work, a whole bunch of character conflict, a whole bunch of contrived character conflict, a whole bunch of uncontrived character conflict, and a whole lot to talk about. So let's not waste any more time, and let's hop right into it. Editing me, are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go. What's up, guys? That guy with a pencil here. Fun fact, I do happen to the pencil file. Have it on me and keep it on me at all times. And another fun fact. Warning. This video will contain extreme amounts of King Glaze / defense. Mostly the latter, but probably a chunk of the former, because I am biased. If you are looking for a review without that, my apologies. I will try to play both sides as fairly as possible, but I will readily admit that I am biased. And this opening page is one of the biggest reasons why I'm biased. Look at how happy he is, bro. Bro got thick just because his baby was finally born, dog. As we see on this opening page. King, feeling a bit nervous? And King, thicker than a snicker, says, "Who? Me? Never." Notably, once again, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I don't have kids, as far as I know. I don't think so. I don't think I got Batman. I don't think there's a what would even be the name comparison? I don't think there's a Damien with a pencil out there. Heaven forbid there is. But, with that being the case, dog, at least from what I've heard, from whether it be my own direct bloodline in the case of, like, my parents and how they talk about me and me spawning into existence, or my cousins, or my friends who have had kids, or their friends who have had kids, or anything. Having your first child is something that will affect you for the rest of your days. In a literal sense, in a non-literal sense, in a spiritual, emotional, every single way possible. And that's what I've been told about having your first kid. Notably, people can have first kids throughout many different eras of their life. Many different times in their life. Remember, King waited literal hundreds of years to have his first child. Specifically with Diane. He waited years to pop out little Nasians. So you know he's happy. You know he's happy. And you know he would do anything for that baby. I was about to say baby boy, but baby. Because it's just a baby right now. Still a baby 18 years later. So I'm just putting this in your head. Alright? When the glaze starts, I want you to remember this. Having your first kid, very, very important stuff. Now, right now, while you still have that emotion in your head, imagine your first kid being kidnapped. And then replaced with somebody else's kid. I want you to think of the vision. I want you to think of the vision. I want you to rub your fingers on your temples and think about it. Alright? Alright? We'll come back to this. But with that being the case, we get into the chapter itself. And we see that Myrtle has left the fairy realm entirely. Bro didn't just book it to the edge of the fairy realm. He didn't just book it to another part of the fairy realm. Bro hit the... and then dove straight out the one entrance of the fairy realm. I say one entrance because I'm not sure if there are other entrances. Unlike the demon world where we sort of had to establish that whole like honeycomb in the sky is just a bunch of different and why can I speak English? A bunch of different entrances to the mortal realm, or maybe even other realms. We don't know like how interconnected. Presumably it's the mortal realm though that all those portals connect to. This seems to be the only fairy realm door that we've seen so far, so Myrtle ran all the way to that and left out. And of course, he's 18, man. He's in a very vulnerable emotional state. Remember this. Remember this, my boy Myrtle. He's in a very emotional, that's not a word, emotional and vulnerable state. As he pulls up. And then, I'm not exactly sure what he's reaching for here. I do believe he does end up reaching for, like, a mullen pill. Just out of sheer habit, sheer instinct, to suppress that pain, that agony, as he totters out of the demon, not the demon realm, the fairy realm. But then, he just can't bring himself to do it. As he reaches for it, grabs the whip, and slams it. Why? Why? Bro hits one of them yells so hard, his face literally lengthens, bro. Look at the mouth on that bad boy. You could swallow gallons. But with that being the case, Myrtle's going through it. And here's the thing, right? Myrtle, he's going to go on to make decisions in this chapter I'm going to say are less than intelligent. Like very, very, very less than intelligent. Like, so less than intelligent, it actually kind of doesn't make sense, at least without the character is established. But I'll say this. As contrived, or how nonsensical it may be, I can understand why. Once again, I'm going to soon turn into the greatest King Glazer you've ever seen soon enough. So, don't worry. I know I'm biased. But, here's the thing. Putting my bias aside, I can understand why Myrtle's feeling this way. Why he's in such a vulnerable state. Why he's hitting the why so long. It splits across text boxes and needs to be broken up by a dash. I completely understand why. Because I can't imagine, bro. You spend your whole life, your whole living memory. Because I'm not sure about y'all. I don't even remember, like, anything before age 10. Except for, like, sparse moments here and there. Like, if I try to forcefully, like, draw out a memory from that time period or before, I just can't. It doesn't exist. It's like the data was wiped. I can remember stuff clearly from the past couple years about. And some sporadic moments even before that. But heck, even a majority of my education, I can't necessarily tell you much. Like, if you were to put me in, like, a 9th grade math class right now, I'd probably struggle. Because I learned that stuff a long time ago. 9th grade English, 9th grade history, 9th grade science. I would struggle because I have not used it, so I lost it. But imagine all that time you spent developing yourself as a core fundamental individual. All that time. Remember, I was only 18. All that time you spent. And you were just told about something that could hypothetically help you, that could hypothetically save you. You've been in this fairy realm for the past 18 years of your life, as far as you know. You're the son of the fairy king, the eldest son, unless he has to trust you. He has to have faith in you. Of course he does. Of course. It's only natural that he'd have faith in you and trust you. But then this kid, this random, shows up looking more like your parents than you ever did. Compile that on with years upon years upon years. So not just self-doubt about your nature as a fairy or a giant, as a hybrid, as the true child of the fairy king and the giant queen. No, years of external doubt. Years of your fellow people looking at you and being like, I'm not sure if you're really a fairy like that for real, for real. I don't really see the vision right now, but I don't really see it. Years upon years of that. But you were able to suppress it. You were able to doubt it. You were able to push it all down because your daddy loved you. He had to, right? Because you're his son. And he said you were his son. So that made it all okay. So, when you go to ask for a certain substance, a la Loka Deor, if you will, you believe that your father will give it to you. Because you're his oldest son. He would never give it to the person who has only reawakened and reignited every single existential fear you've had about your very nature. He would never, ever do that, right? No way. No way he would give it away. Just like that to a boy he met not 2 years ago. You don't know. You don't know that this is... And here's the thing. Even if you don't know, you fear the likelihood that this is the real son of the fairy king. That all those times where you told people they were wrong, all those times you told yourself you were wrong, that no, you had to be King and Diane's kid. There's no way. There's no way you could just be human, right? You had the person who made you question, that proved by your very father that, oh yeah, you were never the real son. You never get the same privileges, the same benefits, none of that sort. In that sense, you're worthless. So goodbye. That's what Myrtle's thinking right now. That kind of, and notably, it works because I can understand all that, and all the context has been laid cleanly for that. But as a byproduct of 4 nights not spending too much time on Myrtle, I can get why people may not like this, because considering what Myrtle goes on to do later on. But I can understand it. With all that context, plus the angst you go through as a teenager, like, I don't know about y'all, 18-year-old me was edgy. I wore all black, and I know I'm wearing blue right now. I know my typical recording shirt is black, so I know y'all like, huh? But trust me, I was undeniably edgy. I was an edgelord. So, with that being the case, I know them dark emotions rolling through him. And notably, I didn't have any reason to be edgy. I was just edgy because I thought it was cool. Myrtle has good reason to be edgy. And we're going to see how this edge comes to bite him. As he screams out, why? And he questions, why, my father? Why did it go to that outsider? Why didn't it go to me? And once again, let me just lay out an early little drizzle of King defense. Let me lay out an early little drizzle of King defense after this sip. That was more than a sip. That was a couple gulps. But, Myrtle, you're a smart kid. 18 years old, you're an adult now. You do the math, bucko. What would Loka Deor even do for you? You tell me. You tell me. You know you're human. You know it. You may be in the knot, but you know it. What would Loka Deor even do for you? This resource that only appears every 1,000 years. Tell me, Mert, what would it even do? Huh? That's a pretty good reason not to give it to you. And hey, King likely told you about it in the past, according to Sixtus. You just forgot. Because you probably realized back then, especially when your doubts were probably just as high as they are now, it'd be wasted on you. Because it wouldn't do anything. So there's no point. But, regardless, that aside, once again coming to Myrtle's defense and getting ready to defend him from the very poor decision he makes this chapter. What does that matter? It's not about what Loka Deor could or couldn't do for Myrtle in particular. It's the fact that a sacred treasure, no chastity form, was given to a stranger of 2 years. Even if it was King's truest, eldest child. Even if that were truly the case, and that was absolutely correct. That doesn't change anything. Because Nasians wasn't raised as Myrtle's eldest. Not Myrtle's. Nasians wasn't raised as King's eldest son. He didn't have to go through the responsibility, the suffering, the agony, the doubt, the pain that Myrtle had to go through while being a false eldest, in a sense. So, Nasians, who's just strolled into the fairy realm only 2 years in, gets the most sacred of all treasures that the fairy realm has to offer. Of course it get him mad. Of course it get his blood pumping. Of course it get his brain loaded up with all that negative juice. His cortisol levels spiking through the roof. Of course he would make a fatal mistake. As we see, Myrtle lashes out. He destroys the entire area. He whips his hand back and forth. He whips his hand back and forth. He has himself a good old tantrum. And as he's breathing heavy, as he's sitting there, a certain someone strolls up. Or I suppose floats up. Now let me hit a certain voice real quick. I'm a scientist. Experiments are what I do. Yes. What angers you, Myrtle? What brings you to despair? Let old Daddy Kilgon bring you to freedom. And we see Myrtle, after leveling the entire area, he hits the Nani and goes, "You're still here." No need to glare at me so. Perhaps we misread each other earlier, but I believe we both stand to benefit. And here's the thing. Kilgon's not wrong. if what Kilgon says is true. But that's a very big if. And Kilgon himself is a very big if, as we'll soon find out. Because he may not even count as himself. He may be just like Gnostians, but the exact opposite of Gnostians, if you know what I'm talking about. As we see, Kilgon grips up that chaos staff that they hold. And notably, Kilgon keeps on talking, keeps on sending out these messages, keeps on attempting to connect. Calm Kingdom Hearts, please, the world, where's for? Sorry, that was the Kingdom Hearts fan of me broke free for a second. Don't worry about that. I got him surprised he's in harder chains now. He's sealed away. But with it being the case, what do you think? Could you lend me your power, please? Hey, I'll admit, Kilgon. Maybe I judged you too harshly, but maybe I judged you too harshly because let me think. I think he's the first ever, and I mean ever, Camelot soldier to say please. He asked nicely. It's not like we can really, like, bro did ask nicely. He was a kind, sweet soul when he was like, "Will you lend me your power, please? With a cherry on top." Like he did say please. So I gotta give Kilgon credit for that. No matter what he does later, no matter what he gets later, or what he should get later, he did say please. That's more than anyone else. Even my big Papa Pelgar, I don't think he ever said please. I think he told them to sit and eat dinner with him. But with that being the case, Kilgon isn't asking for just nothing. Asking of the kindness of Myrtle's heart. As he says, then I will make your wish come true instead. And we see Myrtle. He locks in slightly. He's in a very emotionally vulnerable state, but he's still Myrtle, eldest son of the fairy king and the giant queen. He's Myrtle. He ain't gonna fall for that like that. In fact, if Myrtle was actually that smart, he would have run right back into the fairy realm. But with that aside, he hits the, "Don't give me that. I'm not about to bargain with a total stranger like you." See, this is how I should have known. In the live reaction, we can check it over our Patreon for Souls $1 a month. Become a member for Souls $3 a month. Check out the 31-minute live reaction in this very chapter. But this is what I should have known, that Myrtle, he was too far gone. Not just from the chapter title being named Tragedy, but also from the fact that Myrtle says a total stranger. Myrtle, this man is not a stranger. He's barely even a man, as we'll come to find out. Myrtle, this is one of your mortal enemies, dog. Dog, you love your pops. If not your pops, you love your mama, don't you? He literally despises them. Him and his whole crew. His whole gaggle of individuals. You know this man's from Camelot. He already snitched on himself. Bucko, Myrtle. I should have known you were going to go to the dark side. Anakin, you got the same kind of cut too. I should have known. But we see that despite Myrtle raising that very ample defense of, "I'm not about to bargain with someone like you." But notably, look at how he put his whip sword away. So he is actually willing to bargain. He may as well be Dr. Stephen Strange talking to Dormammu. As we see that Kilgon hits the... He did not hit that. He just hit a hand. But still, the cloak is thrown away. And we see Kilgon goes on to explain. "We've both been rejected by our peers. I think we'd understand each other." And we see Myrtle hit the... "You! Naughty Dice Skittle! You're a two-headed lizard man!" What? What? What is this? What is this? Like, if I could hit the Invader Zim voice, I could. What is this? I can't do it. What? What is that? I know y'all are going to be like, "Oh, Pencil, have you looked in the mirror recently?" I have! Thank you very much. And I wonder what I am too every single day. But that aside, bro, what is that? How does that function? And, like, notably, the physics aren't physicking. The math ain't mathin'. We'll see that both of Kilbogon's heads do have an eye patch over their respective eye. But like, look at the angles here, bro. Look at this revealed eye and this revealed eye. Do you know what Kilbogon long face would have to be doing? This is going to be Kilbogon long face and short face. Kilbogon LF and Kilbogon SF. They call them two legendary gachapons. But with that being the case, Like, Longface would have to have been, like, turtled down in order to be on the same level as Shortface. And not just turtled down, like, turtled down as in, like, their neck would literally have to delete itself in order for them to be on par. Because you would see their snout through the hood, which you can't do. Unless it's like a magic hood that puts two false eyes, which may be possible, you know, world of magic. The anatomy behind the hood just, it ain't mathing. But interesting, a two-headed lizard man. Notably, we do know there are beast men within the world of simulations. That's been established. If you remember way back when, and I mean way back when, like, this is early 100s type B, way back when. Zhivago, or Zivago, I'm not exactly sure how you say, Bond's father, essentially. The wolf beast man, we do know they exist, but interestingly enough, we never necessarily got an origin for them, I don't think. We know the vampires were born directly from chaos itself, in a very similar vein to all other monsters. That's why it was called Oshido, Mother of Monsters, or Chaos Mother of Monsters? I forget what the Oshido title had to do specifically. I have not seen Cursed by Light. Not Cursed by Light. Well, to be fair, I haven't seen Cursed by Light in years either. But I haven't seen Prisoners of the Sky in a while. But interesting. A two-headed lizard man. Neat. So we know beastmen do exist. I guess there are more types and variations than we thought. Because this is my first ever hearing of a lizard man. We've seen a bunch of different characters. We've seen demons with a lizard-esque designs. But we've never seen explicitly a lizard man. Which, of course, will naturally raise the question, wait a minute. Unless my brain ain't braining right now, and I know it don't be braining often, don't Arthur, you know, despise all the other races, all the other major species? Ain't that the status quo? So, Kilgon, tell me, Bucko. You can lean into my ear and whisper it to me, pal. How on earth are you allowed to work for Camelot? I know y'all are gonna be like, well, Nanashi's able to work for Camelot. Why wouldn't Kilgon? Nanashi trained Arthur and was a part of his legion well before he acquired Chaos. Unless I'm mistaken, or plot twisted, or bamboozled, Kilgon is a recent addition. How though? Like, maybe Arthur, because like, would Kilgon, just because they have man in their name, do they count as human? Is that it? Like is that the dividing factor? Arthur's like, you're a lizard man. Ooh, lizard man? Man isn't human? You know what? I think I'll stretch it. Go ahead. Come here. Work with me. Is that it? Because otherwise, I don't know how this guy doesn't meet the criteria. And it's not just me who is shocked that this guy meets the criteria. But as Kilgon goes to explain, someone else is going to be shocked that Kilgon reaches the criteria. As Kilgon goes on to explain, yes, the son of a pitiful race created by an ancient mage on a whim. They once feared us as the descendants of dragons, supposedly. But now I'm reviled as an ugly monster. Which is interesting. Very interesting. Like, do they have two separate consciousnesses because they have two separate brains? Is the brain, like, in their neck? I don't, like... I'm not exactly sure how you interact with this guy. Is it... Do I put an S on it? Because there are two... I don't know. I genuinely don't know. And that scares me the most. I'll be completely real with you. But we see a little something interesting. I'm sorry. Kilgon. Could you repeat that first bit? I'm sorry. You were created by an ancient mage on a whim. That's not Chaos. That's not the Demon King, though the Demon King should technically count as an ancient mage, as they were very proficient in magic. That's not the Supreme Deity. And that definitely ain't the Fairy Tree. Who's the ancient mage with enough power to actively create an entire species? I wonder. Now, don't get me wrong, this could still end up being Chaos and they just don't know their history. Entirely possible. Demons likely didn't know their history, neither the goddesses or anything else. But the reason this is so interesting to me is because we know an ancient mage who could have been around long enough for multiple generations of lizardmen to come and go and likely would have experimented with creating their own species if they were hypothetically inspired by chaos. Y'all think Merlin did this? Huh? Like, what are the, like, there are two other candidates, I think. It's either Merlin's dad, an ancient mage, who was extremely powerful before he, walked into purgatory and came out. Not walking. But is it either him, or it has to be, unless I'm mistaken, Gother. And I'm not talking our Gother, I'm talking original Gother, like demon Gother. But in either case, why would they do that? Like, maybe there's stuff that could be done. But I'm still not exactly sure why Merlin or her father or, like, and I can't even think of why Kuzak and Shenlong. Like, I'm trying to think of characters that would qualify for ancient mage territory that would have created an entire species. One thing I do really like, though, one thing that is revealed, is that Kilgon wasn't just rejected. Well, let me slow down. Kilgon was not just rejected by humans, if he even tried to meet with humans and mingle with humans. No, he was rejected by his own fellow lizardmen for being born two-headed, which is interesting because it puts him in a different scenario than what Myrtle was in. And it's why Myrtle can't truly sympathize, or at least empathize, with Kilgon, because at least Kilgon was born his species. It's just his species didn't accept him because he was born different. Myrtle was adopted from another species. So it's interesting to see that Arthur not only let him into the fold, gave him a chaos staff, gave him this high rank of power, but all that only to, as we see here, as Kilgon says, "No one can live alone, it's true, but no world is willing to accept a sinister-looking lizard-man sorcerer. None but King Arthur's, that is. Yes, the king offered me Camelot as a place to live. He is the one true king. He who offers his hand to all, even the least privileged." And that's interesting. But look at this. This is what feeds into the idea that Camelot is its own sort of mini multiverse. Its own, essentially a conglomerate of who knows how many worlds. We see that in this reality that's presumably Kil'jaardan's, where we see his two-headed self here, he's surrounded by amicable lizardmen. Presumably, these aren't real. None of them are. Kil'jaardan's mind birthed them. He created them. Which is interesting. It goes to show that Arthur's ability isn't necessarily limited down to a tiny scope, a tiny spectrum. The most we've seen so far for Camelot and people reproduction is about one person total. For, I forget his name. I forget the guy's name already. From this guy from the start of part 2, who was with Anne, Donnie, and Sylvain. He only had his little sister. The woman we saw at the start of that arc also only had her husband back. But it seems like Arthur, while using Camelot, can recreate a whole world. Heck, even Jericho, going way back to her, and even Pelgard, they all only get one. Jericho only got her fake little limbs, and Pelgard only has his son. But Kil'jaardan seems to have an entire world entirely centered around himself, which is interesting and shows the upper limits, if not really, it kind of shows the opposite, the lack of upper limits for chaos and its abilities. So remember this, Arthur can create entire worlds of people, completely born of the imagination of one two-brain man. But we see that Myrtle questions what I questioned. "I find that hard to believe. The stories say King Arthur detests all non-humans," which he does. But we see Kilgon get specific. "A mere difference in perception. He only hates the 4 clans that continually tormented humans with war." Which is interesting. It implies that the Lizardmen and the Beastmen in general didn't necessarily have too much of a stake in the wars between the greater 5 species. And it also somewhat implies that they either existed but didn't have a stake, meaning they may actually predate Merlin, or they were created after the Holy War, when it didn't necessarily matter, and then by the time of the second one, they had little input. Notably, once again, this is the first time we're seeing lizardmen. We've seen lizard-like demons, but we have not... I'm trying to do like a whole scan of the entire 300 chapters, well now 400 chapters plus of the series. Have we ever seen a lizardman before? No, we've seen lizards. So like, this is the first time we're even hearing of lizardmen, but this isn't the first time we're hearing of beastmen, but we never necessarily see beastmen either in the past Holy War or in the new Holy War ever join the conflict. So it's interesting that Arthur is supposedly, and I say supposedly because I still don't fully trust it, supposedly offering neutrality, if not acceptance, to those who were not part of the other big four clans. Interesting. I wonder how much that can be stretched. Because once again, we know Nanashi is allowed, despite clearly being well known as a goddess by Arthur. But how far does that stretch? How far does that go? And how much contradiction is Arthur willing to facilitate? Because look, Kilgon's world is one of his fellow people, his fellow lizardmen, not other humans. And a world that Myrtle dreams of also won't be filled with other humans. It'll be filled with something else. As we see, like Kilgon points out, so, returning to my offer, our king is seeking a certain Loka Deor, passed down by the fairy clan. And Myrtle begins to sweat as he realizes exactly what they're talking about. Once again, I will admit, super contrived. Like, this just gets mentioned now, the same day Kilgon shows up to look for it. You mean to tell me if Myrtle just didn't know about it? Like, I think Kilgon literally asked him, maybe? I forget already. Jeez, it's only been 2 chapters, I don't know why I'm forgetting. But essentially, it was already kind of brought up that Myrtle didn't even fully remember what Loka Deor was. So, that's real teeny tiny bit contrived that Kilgon's here looking for that in particular. But once again, makes sense. You know, you gotta have a story happen, so contrive what you need to. And we see that Myrtle is shocked as it's brought up, and Kilgon goes on to explain. But they're clamping down on outsiders going into their realm. As I see it, they must have a trap near the entrance that identifies and fends off enemies. Even reaching their king is difficult, much less opening talks with him. So, King, or the Great Fairy Tree, or even the Fairy Realm itself, has done something interesting. It's created a very high-level barrier. An insanely high-level barrier. Because remember, the barrier that Arthur has around his little multiverse is one that only keeps out, seemingly enough, purebred non-human races. Lancelot can apparently enter, Tristan can apparently enter, every human, as long as you have a drop of it, can supposedly enter. But fairies, giants, demons, and goddesses are all kept out. But it seems like the barrier around the fairy realm, or the gate, once again, seemingly this is the only gate we know so far, it is blocking off people that are considered, as Kilgon puts it, enemies. Which means that this barrier is so high level, it probably takes into some account heart reading, and like reading your intentions for entering the fairy realm, which is very interesting. It's once again, I'm not sure. I guess technically since Arthur's barrier keeps out more and it's covering likely a much more complicated pseudo-realm or just genuine realm that has pseudo-realms inside of it, then I guess you could still say Arthur's is more impressive. But if King made this himself, that's a very impressive barrier feat. Like, very, very good, considering it's around the entire time space. And if the fairy tree made it itself, still very, very impressive. That it's able to do that so easily. Recognize and fend off enemies to the point where others aren't even able to invade. Realize the demon world didn't have that kind of barrier around it. The Chaos Knights were able to just walk right on in. We don't know enough about the Celestial Realm, admittedly. And we don't know... Yeah, I wouldn't say we know. There's no, like, portal or anything over the mortal realm. Like, there are portals, but once again, there's no barrier around it preventing anyone's entry. So that's interesting. The fairy realm is very, very advanced in terms of its barrier usage, which is neat. But, with that being the case, it shows that King, he's taking it seriously. Arthur's not being considered any sort of joke here. He specifically, or the world itself, the fairy world, is specifically blocking itself off from enemies, as it views them as possible threats. Though, that's intriguing. It makes me wonder, when was the last time King even left the realm? Was way back when, in the Arthur Siege chapter, the Siege on Leonis by Arthur. I wonder if Diane and King even left the realm. Or were they standing on the edge of it right next to the portal about to send an attack through? I don't know. I presume they left it then. But outside of that, King, the protector of the Great Fairy Tree, has not left the realm in a while. Intriguing. As, once again, Kilgon says, we can't even reach him. I'll toggle open talks with them. But we see that Myrtle, once again, playing logically, is like, huh, Well, sorry to tell you, sorry to rain on your parade, but negotiating won't help you. The Fairy King would never give that sauce to a human. Once again, Myrtle, as you can see, he's sweating, he's dripping, he's smiling nervously because he realizes that he himself falls into that category. He himself would never be given Loka Deor. If anything, he would have to take it for himself by force because he is a human. And while Kilgon may not be human, it doesn't matter because he's fighting for humans. And we see that Kilgon notices a sort of weakness here. Notably, it seems like Shortface seems to smile a little bit here, while Longface seems to get a little bit like, Like, I think both realize, if they are separate consciousnesses, they realize that this little something can be pulled here. As they say, then lend me a hand. My king needs Loka Deor to help those who suffer in his domain. Help me, and I promise to give you the power to dispel that anger and despair. So, remember how I pointed out? Arthur, you have literal deific powers, bro. What do you mean? You can create entire worlds with their own entirely separate populations for who knows how many individuals, but you can't heal sicknesses? You can't change that. You can make entirely tangible, unchanging, and eternal illusions. Not even illusions, tangible things. But you can't heal disease? Press X to down on that one. If I had to guess, the main reason Arthur truly wants Loka Deor, because I've seen people saying, oh, it's for Deodra. Deodra's going to get Loka Deor. I think Arthur just wants it for himself. So the Fairy King and the rest of the other species can't have that, in case something were to happen. Because Loka Deor is an asset. If Meliodas were to fall ill, if Elizabeth were to fall ill, heck, we even see, which ironically enough, someone pointed out, I believe the Loka Deor is the exact same one that King ended up using in Grudge of Edinburgh to try and heal Elizabeth, and it didn't do anything. So clearly it's not that effective. But still, that could be a very useful asset. Wouldn't it be good to take it away? That's what I see here. I don't think Arthur's going to become some sort of savant running around and spending this very little, very rare amount, if he even knows how much there is. He wouldn't give it out. He'd just hoard it for himself, because that's an asset that you wouldn't want your enemy to have. Kind of like if the Fountain of Youth suddenly respawned, which is something I don't think has happened, but if it were to suddenly respawn, Arthur wouldn't want them to have that. He would probably make Kilgon or whoever he sends make that exact same offer. Hey, my king just wants to use it to help his people and all that, so please give it to me. I don't think so. I think Kilgon is manipulating Myrtle, but at the same time, I think Kilgon is being manipulated by Arthur. There's got to be some sort of catch. I don't believe that Arthur accepts any of the other species, even ones who have man in their name. But that's me being suspicious of Arthur. And of course, while we see Myrtle make this face, I think we all know the choice that Myrtle is going to inevitably make. As we see, we are back in the fairy realm, and notably 2 deers are just like, man, ain't it the life being, oh sweet mother of mercy, as Diane stomps through. Once again, I do love this. I love the scale of Diane really being used and shown off here. The fact that she needs to tiptoe through a realm that's not inherently her own. As it was stated last chapter, or the chapter before, giants are able to adapt to the sickly sweet air, but they aren't actually meant to be there. So their massive size does actually end up getting in the way and interfering with the natural ecosystem. I do like that. It goes to show that technically giants really ain't supposed to be there, but of course things change and Diane is welcome there. But we see she apologizes. Oh, sorry, down there. I'm kind of in a hurry. King, where are you? Oh, there you are. King. We see King strolling along, sad, as Diane asks, what will we do? Listen, I think Tiore is starting to catch on a little bit about Nasians. Myrtle may not be far behind. If so, what? Diane. King? Okay. If they're your significant other and they're cool with it, do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. Alright? Maybe some people are like, don't do it in public. Gosh, and I think it's fantastic if you are emotionally vulnerable with your partner. To be emotionally vulnerable with anybody, even your own family, is very, very hard to do. So I respect that King trusts and loves Diane enough that he's more than willing to be emotionally vulnerable. That's fantastic stuff. This isn't what Meliodas does. Not at all. But dog, if you don't get out your wife's chest in public, dog, the whole realm is watching. Ain't nobody come here to see all that. Put that away. Keep that to the, I don't know, fairy bedroom or whatever. Like, dude. No one wants to see you make your 8th kid, dog. Like, I bet y'all made them all throughout the realm, huh? Oh, you freaks. Nobody, Diane doesn't even react negatively. She's just like, oh, King, my husbando is worried. She doesn't react to, King, please get out of my chest. Like, dog. King. A little self-respect, gosh darn it. You went straight for the mountains. But with that being the case, we see that King, that's a little bit of King anti-glaze you're going to hear from me in this review. As we see King goes, I'm just so hated. I'll never recover from this. And, well, it definitely is dramatized. I can understand. This is like what King, to some degree, genuinely feels. As Diane naturally asks, what? Hated? By whom? And we see King answers. You know, as much as I just clowned it for like, do this somewhere else, not in public. This is a hilarious shot. Like, because like technically King's not even as big as a baby, I guess. And like if we were to scale Diane down to size, like maybe like someone who's born early, but like even like newborns, at least when I've held them. Once again, big family, lots of friends. So I've held newborns before. They're like really, really tiny. Like they probably wouldn't, but they're big enough that they would most likely fit over the chest area. But King is so small relative to his wife that he's actually just drowned in him. And you can see that here by this angle that is really forced to look down. But we see that King hits he called me thick-headed and bad taste. He said I angered him. And that he had the biggest look of scorn on his face. I thought that giving him Loka Deor was the right thing to do, and now look. King is actually genuinely crying here. Like, of course, it's once again Nakaba, so he's not gonna play it 100% straight. But you can see those are real tears. He's feeling rejected by his own flesh and blood, and we see that Diane realizes, oh, and she goes on to say, what? Didn't you say you'd keep quiet about Loka Deor, King? And we see King admits one of his character flaws. But I knew how hard he was working to craft that medicine for his friend. I thought this forking over Loka Deor would be trampling over all that effort. But every single day, he trudges out of the tunnel of whispers, shoulders slumped low. And I just couldn't stand seeing my own child like that. That's it. So here's the thing. That is different. This is fundamentally different. This establishes a couple things. Based on what Diane says and how King follows it up, they knew from round start that Nasins was their kid. If not round start, earlier. Much earlier than I thought. I thought hypothetically they may have guessed at it, but not hard confirmed. No, King says, my own child. Diane says, Tiori is catching on. They've been known that Nasins is their kid. So now, the question of not giving Loka Deor sooner is very, very valid. Especially considering if you knew he was your kid, why not give it sooner? Why not give it the moment you found out and you knew that he was trying to wake up the Night of Prophecy that's destined to save the world? I will give King that. That is a big mistake. That is a fundamental mistake of his character. But at the same time, let me come to King's defense. At the same time, there is some sort of logic behind it. At least the logic that I can partially understand. The logic I can see here by King is that he recognizes that Nasins is a hardworking person. And he recognizes that Nasin's field of passion in medicine production kind of just gets curb stomped and raffle stomped by Loka Deor. Because Loka Deor fixes everything. It's a cure-all. That's the thing. It's a fix-anything button. Of course, we saw it possibly not work in Gretchen of Edinburgh, but outside of that extremely rare exception that was based on a super complex magical curse born of chaos itself, yeah, it kind of just bang all of Nasins' interests permanently. Because once he consumes that, and is able to replicate it infinitely, which is something that King likely has figured out his child can do at this point, well then all of Nasins' hopes and dreams and passions are destroyed. It's kind of like, I don't know. I'll go specifically with the art reference because, you know, I got the pencil. But, like, say hypothetically, my dad, for the longest time, had a pencil that would draw whatever was in my head. I would touch the pencil to the page, and then boom, whatever I wanted to draw would come out perfect. And my dad didn't give it to me. One, I would feel a little bit betrayed, but two, I could understand it in the sense that, well, that would kind of ruin art for me. What's the point of refining my skills, getting better, trying to draw and learn new art styles if I can just perfectly produce everything instantly? And I think that's what King feared. He feared ruining his son's passion, in a sense, and destroying everything, not just giving up a very valuable resource, which is unfortunate, but I can still understand. King just didn't know how to approach a scenario like that. And that's unfortunate, but once again, it makes sense. I need to remind y'all, King didn't have a dad or a mom. He had a tree. That boy had not a clue. If anything, he had to play parent, in a sense, whenever Elaine got born, because she is noted to be the younger sister. The gap between King and Elaine is entirely unknown, but, like, it's presumable enough that she was pseudo-raised by him. That's the only raising experience he has. And notably, Diane is in the same boat, where there's just no info. She didn't have a traditional childhood either. So how to approach raising a child, especially a child that is kidnapped? Your firstborn being kidnapped and randomly shows up and needs you to do this very specific thing, but you know and can recognize that they want to do a specific thing their own way, so you don't want to ruin it all. Yeah, I can understand King making the mistake of not immediately giving it up, even if it meant the detriment of the world, because that's his firstborn kid. You make a lot of mistakes as a parent. That's just natural. And on the opposite side, I can even see King finally giving up, finally breaking. He may have been able to resist it for a month, 12 months, a year. But remember, once again, from King's time span, he may have waited a whole of 2 seconds to give it to Nasians. As it's even mentioned before we cut over to this time frame, that King and Diane view time completely differently due to their lifespans. So, from our perspective, he waited a whole 2 years. From Nasian's perspective, he waited a whole 2 years. That's big, that's long. But in King's perspective, 2 years may as well be 2 days. He barely waited, because he just couldn't bear to see his child in dire straits. And yeah, I don't know, once again, as a guy who's spoken to a bunch of parents, as a guy who's babysat before, for kids that aren't me, or related to me, or in any sense, yeah, it's really hard to say no to a kid. It's really hard to not help them when you have the opportunity to. So even if he promised to not to at first in order to try and preserve Nasian's hopes and intentions and dreams, eventually, yeah, he would. He'd break. And that's been a part of King's character. The fact that he's impulsive, he's rash, he struggles at making decisions, he struggles understanding and making connections to people. Of course, all this makes sense for his character. And that's why I like it. That's why I'll defend my goat. Alright, I'll defend it. Especially considering this is all for his firstborn kid. And I know, Myrtle was raised as his firstborn. Shouldn't he care more about Myrtle? Yeah, he should. He's wrong for what he did to Myrtle. Absolutely. And that's what his kids are going to come tackle him on. As we see that someone says, so it is true! King and Diane turn, shocked and bamboozled. I guess their sensory abilities just suck now. They turn to see and also Zillion, Zana, Belt, and Sixtus. The whole crew has pulled up, all 5 of them. And we see that Diane is shocked and says, kids? And King naturally asks, why are you all here? And then Zillion explains, Pao told us about what Mom said to Tiore. So, the whole idea that Nasians is their real older brother has been leaked by Pao. Because of course Pao did it. Because of course Pao would cause trouble. Because Pao is a waste, not even a waste of space. Here's the thing about waste of space, they're typically neutral. Pao is a blight on this series, gosh darn it. Pao disgusts me. Their appearance, to their character, to their everything that makes them whole. The fact that Nakaba continues to draw this character is an insult to me personally. Still can't tell you why though. I don't know. It's really concerning. They don't even actually look that bad this chapter. And it's too late. I've fallen too deep into the darkness. I'm just going to keep hating on Pao. But with that being the case, we see that all the kids have slightly different reactions. Pao looks a bit concerned and a little bit guilty that they told on their parents, which is actually nice. I do like that characterization for Pao. Belt seems awfully calm with it. He's like, no wonder you were so oddly close with that human. Didn't think he'd be an older brother. But once again, Hands behind the head. He's very relaxed. Like, whatever, new bro, new bro. He seems like the most laid back of the kids. Very much embodying his father at an earlier point in his life where he was very laid back. I'd say he embodies King the earliest we've seen him in the timeline. We never got to see, like, baby King or early years of King. But, like, King when Helbram was alive and all that, and he still had faith in humans. Like, that kind of King that we saw in that short flashback chapter. That's the King that Belt seems to embody most purely, and it makes sense considering he looks a lot like Helbram. And Helbram was the origin of that King for the most part. And we see that Zana is more like, I can't believe that Nasians was her brother all along. She's more so in the shock and confused phase, as she's probably starting to slowly build the pieces together and see everything that lines up. And then, of course, Sixtus is the one who has the most vile reaction here. Quite a devious reaction, if you will. As he says, Mom, Dad, if all that is true, why did you keep Loka Deor from Myrtle, who you raised as your own son, and instead give it to someone, some guy that you just happen to be related to? Now, this is where I'm gonna low-key get on Sixtus's case. But once again, I can understand it, since Sixtus, being the third oldest, is probably no older than 16. Presumably, if King and Diane really had them back to back to back to back, and they aren't septuplets. And even if he was 18, I'll give him this. He's in a similar emotional state to Myrtle, where he feels betrayed by his father. But, dude, Nasians is their first son. Biological son. And they actually wanted him. Like, notably, Myrtle was an accident. Unfortunately. Myrtle was a victim. And also, the bigger reason, the Loka Deor would have done nothing for Myrtle. Meanwhile, King waited 2 years to get to know his real first son, and then gave him the Loka Deor. And offered it to him to help save the world. Nasians isn't just some guy you have to be related to. He's your eldest brother and their first child, Sixtus. That's a little bit cruel. I'll say that. I mean, I get it. Once again, I understand the context behind that, because Sixtus doesn't see all that. He just sees, you didn't trust my real older brother, and you gave it to this guy who Sixtus barely trusts anyway. So I can see Sixtus behind that, but that's a little cruel, Buckle. That still is their first child. Once again, Sixtus is like me. He hasn't had kids. And who knows? Depending on how his fellow siblings were born, he never probably had the baby experience. But with that being the case, we see that King says, no, it's not like that. Yes, I tried to give it to him, but he refused. He refused it. Huh? But why do you know about that? King's starting to put some pieces together. And then Sixtus drops La Bomba Deor. As he glares at his father, he says, because Myrtle and I watched you. We heard everything you and Nasian said. So, that is dropped. King didn't just make a mistake with Nasians. He essentially shattered any faith his family had in him. Unfortunate. I'm still giving King a pass. I don't think King's a bad dad. I think he's just a guy put in a really rough situation. Because remember, the difference between regular adoption and Myrtle's type of adoption is that when most people adopt somebody, it's because they chose to actively go out and pick a child of many who are at an orphanage or in some sort of adoption agency. King and Diane didn't pick Myrtle. In fact, King and Diane were robbed of their actual eldest son or eldest child, and then were put in a scenario where they chose to raise Myrtle. If King and Diane really wanted to, Belt would be your eldest brother. The eldest child. They could have gotten rid of Myrtle. They had no obligation to raise him. Not at all. They could just be like, our child was a victim of a changeling plot. We're going to return the baby, or give the baby to Meliodas so he can grow up in Leonis, or under that royal family, so at least he has a human mother. We could give him over to Uncle Bon, so he could be raised, once again, in Benwick, which seems to not be in the fairy realm, where Myrtle would grow up healthier without having to worry about the sickness that would be caused by the fairy realm. They could have done every other easier thing, but they still chose to raise Myrtle as their own, and give him that respect and those responsibilities and that care that real parents can afford. They did that of their own free will. So I don't think King and Diane are bad parents for hesitating to tell him he's adopted, because they know that would shatter his worldview. And they also didn't tell him when he was a baby because they know the insecurities that would cause him. It's not easy. Heck, it's not easy to tell kids they're adopted when they are chosen. At least from what I've heard, I know people who are adopted. They didn't find out till they were 20. Some of the case 18, because they just happened to look like their parents when they were adopted, or they grew up looking like them, or they just didn't ask because they didn't think about it that way. So waiting 18 years, especially within their respective time frame, probably A, isn't that long, and B, it's still a really complicated topic considering the nature of Myrtle's adoption. So I think they made mistakes. I think they are to be held liable for their mistakes, and I think this chapter proves that they will be held liable. But no, I'm not going to do what a decent chunk of the family has done and suddenly turn on King and Diane, and King especially, and call them terrible parents. I just think they are two people with no parental experience being put in a very rough spot that did the very best they could and made the best out of a bad situation and made mistakes doing so. But of course, we move on to see that Nasians is back on that grind. Literally, as he grinds down some plants. And he says, "What even is the matter with that man? Now I've got to do this by myself. I've got to make Percival wake up for me." Once again, I'm going to actually get on Nasians' case here a little bit. Dude, he gave you a cure-all. You should have used it. Like, I know it would slaughter any sort of creative potential you would have from this point on, but that aside, Nasians, that's actually kind of selfish. You mean to tell me you were given the opportunity with your abilities to reproduce something that could save countless lives, and who knows, save your best friend, your idol's life, and just because of the circumstances it was given to you under, you're going to deny it, and now waste more time? Nothing you make will be Loka Deor, Nasians. Let's be real. You've been looking for a solution. King gave you one. The fact that you didn't take it out of spite and out of word from Myrtle is nice. It's sweet. It's stupid. You should have taken it. Just like Myrtle shouldn't have taken the hand he ended up taking, Nasians, you should have taken the hand that was extended to you. Even if Loka Deor wouldn't work, because supposedly it shouldn't. Like, I'll be real. Just like there was no reason to give Loka Deor to Myrtle because it wouldn't work, because it's not going to change biology, Percy's not on the brink of anything. He's not there. His spirit, his consciousness just isn't there anymore. Percy shouldn't wake up for Loka Deor. But still, Nasian should try it, and then realize he needs to change tactics or something like that. The fact that he did it, well, it makes sense for the character. Once again, talking about how Nasian has a passion for medicine making and creation and stuff like that, and thusly he probably would feel a little bit spited that his father of any kind would try and take that all away from him by giving him a cure-all. Of course, that'd be rough. But I think he does make a very childish and teenage mistake, which makes sense within the character. I'm not saying it's bad writing, I'm just saying it is a bad decision. There's the difference. You can have bad writing, and you can have bad decisions, but this bad decision is good writing because it fits within the context of Nasian's character and so on and so forth. But with that being the case, we see Nasian notices a certain something. Tiore walking through the woods. And Tiore is head lowered, stomping along, very sad. But suddenly she hears a jingle. She hears... and she sees a certain someone strolling up in the fairy realm. Shingling, shingling, shingling. And we see, she realizes, oh, Myrtle. I know I chided you about being too big for your britches, but like Nasian says, you're so kind to everyone. I know all your good traits, so no matter what, you're still our big brother, alright? Tiore tries to reconcile, tries to show that it doesn't matter whatever happened, or whatever is different now. Myrtle's still her family, still her big brother. She still loves Myrtle. But unfortunately, she's far too late for that. As Myrtle goes, "No, she ends." And Tiore realizes, wait a second, are you tweaking? And Myrtle goes to say, "And all who side with him." Big brother, I'm not into that, please. "They'll all have to pay. Do you want to take everything from me?" Myrtle has been infested with that chaotic sauce. Bro's got the black sclera and everything. Myrtle has given into the darkness. Now, the question is, will they actually succeed in getting Loka Deor? Doubtful. Even with the Chaos Amp, Myrtle should be one shot. He should be one tap. by heck, probably even Sixtus, not to talk of King himself. Especially Diane. They may hesitate to hurt Myrtle because they still view him as their kid, but I highly doubt King even still has the Loka Deor. He may have despawned it or desummoned it or kept it on his person. So I can see maybe Kilgon breaking in and taking it somehow, but at the same time, Myrtle, he's going to be stopped. Now the question is, how tragic will this stopping be? That's to be seen. I think there's a high likelihood that Myrtle may end up getting got to clean up some loose ends, if you will. However, that's what I think. But you want to know what I also think? I think this chapter is straight gas. Like I mentioned, there's a bunch of character conflicts, there's a good chunk of world building, there's a good bunch of character writing, a good bunch of extra characterization. All that this chapter does have straight peak all throughout it. So I do really, really like it. But, of course, all that aside, you know what the real thing is. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, please leave Chaotic Myrtle in the comment section down below. But the thing is, so much for watching. Please leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you hit that little notification bell so you don't miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do have a Patreon down below where you can support me for as low as $1 things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. You also now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Some of those perks include the live reaction, which is 31 minutes long, to this very chapter. Now, and to thank you so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That of the Pencil, writing off. I'd like to give a thank you to our $3 members, Wakanda Plays, Greyhound, Atkins Void, Astro, Red Wolf 4765, Eternal Flame, and Teen Mitgow. And I'd like to give a thank you to our $5 patrons, Steron, Sean, Panda Goat, Midnight Lord 21, Metal Solid Crisis, Kevin, Ignil, and EHAC1. And I'd like to give a thank you to our $7 member, Autumn Mornings Lazo. And I'd like to give a big thank you to our $10 member, Jay Warrior. And I'd like to give another thank you to our $10 patrons, Joaquin and Idemokami. Along with another juicy thank you to our $25 patron, ChinaDoll09. And I'd like to give a final Giga Gargantuan thank you to our $25 patron, Calvin Elder.